Hi guys, as promised, this is the last part of topic 2. So ecological succession is a very short video, so make sure you take notes and get ready for tomorrow's class. So ecological succession. First, why do we have to study ecological succession? We've been seeing adaptations of organisms and populations and how environmental conditions, when they change, these organisms or populations have been adapted, well, some of them if they want to be successful. Well, also communities and ecosystems will respond to those changes in the environment. So that's why we're studying ecological succession. So the structure of a species composition of communities is going to change every time that the environment changes. And that's what we call ecological succession. One more time. Ecological succession is the passing of communities to reaching a climax community over time. So there's going to be a lot of communities in the middle. Those are called transitory communities or transitory stages in which you're going to see some of the populations that will kind of come and go. Okay, and this will show a gradual change in species composition. So you'll see that some of the species that started during this succession will not be present at the very end. Okay, there are two types of ecological succession, and the purpose of knowing the two types is then the type of species that are present and the main parts, as in like where do they start from, recognizing pictures that represent primary or secondary succession. So let's start with primary succession. Primary succession starts with no life. There's no soil. There's only rock. Okay, so rock starts in primary succession, and there are reasons why something becomes bare rocked. Sometimes after mining activity, for example, there is no more soil, so only what is left is rock. And of course, no organisms can grow without soil except for lichens that we already saw in the previous lecture. Lichens can grow on pretty much everything, so even on bare rock. So lichens and mosses will be the pioneer species that will start a primary succession. So they are called pioneer species, and they will be the first ones to produce the biomass. So eventually, when they die, that will be the composition of the biomass of this ecosystem, and that will give the soil necessary for the development of herbs and weeds and grasses and the next kind of populations that will come into this community. So this is primary succession. Again, there are some intermediate stages or transitory communities that will come here, and those are some plants that you might not see at the very end when you reach the climax in this community. So some of these population of plants will just die off and will never come back, but will give enough biomass and enough productivity for a climax community to get established. Now, climax community doesn't always or is not always represented with trees, but in pictures they tend to show it that way. But a climax community is it will show equilibrium on an ecosystem. That means that you're gonna see those kinds of plants throughout the years. Now, this takes a long time. As you can see here, it takes hundreds of years. Okay, secondary succession. Secondary succession is going to be the re-establishment, a very big word over here, re-establishment of a community after a disturbance. What kind of disturbance we're talking about? Like fire, disease, harvesting, hurricane, tornado. So after that disturbance, what's going to happen is everything is wiped out except the soil. So it does not start from bare rock. So I have some soil, therefore my pioneer species are not necessarily mosses and lichens, right? I'm gonna be able to have some grasses growing because I have some soil available, therefore I have some nutrients available. But still, those will be my pioneer species. Some of them will die and never come back. Some of them will stay even through the climax community. So again, when it reaches that, then we will have to get that climax community established with some of these organisms that were already pioneered or other ones that were not at the beginning. Okay, so this is another picture just to show you a similar picture to the one that I show you with the primary succession. So we have again, the disturbance, and then we're going to have our pioneer species, and then we'll have intermediate, and then to the climax community. Okay, those are some differences from what we talked about between primary and secondary succession. Now, succession in a disturbed ecosystem, which is most of our ecosystems, they're going to affect the total biomass and the species richness and the productivity over time. So even if they recover, they will not, that doesn't guarantee that they would have the same biomass richness and productivity. Okay, now this looks good on theory, but in reality, ecological succession is not as prescribed as I explain it. So the traditional view tells me that there is a balance and we are always trying to reach the climax community, but the current view actually says that ecological succession is always going to be changing the populations from that community. So it's always going to be in some kind of change in these different stages of succession. Okay, now let me talk to you about two types of two definitions that you need to know. So for that, I'm going to use the tropical rainforest as an example to explain on how the tropical rainforest has inertia. And you probably heard inertia in your other classes from science. So inertia is the resistance to change. So tropical rainforests actually have a very high inertia because of the complexity that they have. They have plants growing over other plants. They have different kind of plants. They have a lot of biodiversity, so they can resist change, such as earthquakes or even fires because of the humidity in the area. So they do have a lot of inertia, but they don't have a lot of resilience. And resilience is the ability to rebound. So if purposely the tropical forest gets destroyed, it's very hard to come back to the same level of biodiversity because that has happened through a very long time. So that's an example. The other example is grasslands. So on the other hand, we're going to have grasslands over here showing very good resilience, right? Because they can come every year, they can die out, and then like nothing happened, they will show up next year. So that is having a very high resilience, but they don't have inertia because they can actually change, right? Okay, now how do I know the stage on which an ecological succession how do I know if the ecological succession is in intermediate stages or in climax stages, or if there are disturbances that are going to destroy that community or that ecosystem? Well, I have indicator species. We defined them in the past. Some indicator species are keystone species, but not in all cases. So we have some biomes that will not have those keystone species defining what is wrong with that ecosystem. So an indicator species, again, is a plant or an animal that will tell me if something is wrong, right? So for example, if I'm talking about pollution level, I will have on that biome a specific, in this case, animals that will tell that by their presence will tell me the level of pollution. If there is a high level pollution, I'm going to find more worms that, let's say, mayfly nymphs. So that will tell me the indicator species will help me to determine if my ecosystem is healthy or if it's in a transitory stage or if it's in a pioneer stage and so on. Okay, other examples of indicator species that will tell me again something about the environment, like the amount of sulfur dioxide. Okay, so the last concept I want to explain is prescribed forest fires. And I think in California, you guys probably seen and heard more about this than other people, than other students. So prescribed forest fires are actually used to prevent other kind of fires or further destruction to populations or to ecosystems like this. So they are also called controlled burn or prescribed burn. And what they do is they try to do it so they can have they can have safety for other populations, not only human populations, but let's say the population of these species of trees in this area. So the way that it works, I'm going to show you the way that it works. what they're trying to prevent, before I show you the way that it works, is that this fire spreads to be a crown fire. So we don't want that fire to be up here, because then the wind is going to play an important role. So that's why they kind of burn everything at the bottom. Okay, so how does this work? So the prescribed burn, first they need to select some kind of a fire break. So if something goes out of control, there is something to stop the fire. Then they create two lines of fire. They have the head fire and they have the back fire. So what happens is they are gonna make the fire go into the direction, like in the middle, from the head fire and the backfire, until these two kind of lines of fires will meet in the middle, and they will eventually die out because there is nothing else to be burned, right? That way, whatever weeds, whatever any kind of dry vegetation, that because of climate or because of any accidents that might happen, will spread farther and just affect any other populations around. So that is the purpose of having the prescribed burns. So that's pretty much it for ecological succession.